everybody, and welcome to Raising Vibrations and to the monthly forecasts. Hope you're doing well. And in today's video, I'm going to be helping you understand a little bit about aspects and phases. And this is my little piece on how I do my little forecasts in a unique way. So aspects and phases is a way that evolutionary astrology uses to measure the cycles that planets have in relationship to themselves, okay, and to other planets, pardon me. So what happens is you've got two planets, say for instance Pluto and Venus, and what evolutionary astrology will do is they will take those two archetypes and measure the relationship that they have between each other, and then from that measurement and from that relationship establish what type of phase and what type of evolutionary condition those planets carry within each other. And it's really fascinating because when you begin to measure your planets in relationship to other planets, you begin to see the development of how you actually experience your life through these aspects and phases. Now, I've got a little slideshow over here quickly that I want to show you in terms of what is the philosophy behind aspects and phases and what type of methodology do we use to actually measure this, okay? So I'm going to show you that right now. Okay, so what you're looking at is two pictures. On the left-hand side over here, you can see this is about life itself, okay? The first thing that we understand is that everything is in a cyclic formation. Everything is moving through time and space. And so because of that, it is not separate that when you look at two planets or three planets in a birth chart, that they are also in this life cycle. There is a life cycle that each planet has. And each planet in relationship to another is reflecting where that life cycle is. It's no different than measuring a new moon, a first quarter moon, a last quarter moon, and a full moon. Exactly the same thing. We just do it with planets now. And you can see that when you have a new moon, there's a new intention. When you have a full moon, we're coming into a halfway completion cycle. Again, phasal relationship and life, how it's evolving. The picture on the right-hand side reflects to us that everything is in relationship to everything else. Everything. Okay, it's like a revolving door. The moment that you walk through a revolving door, as you're moving outward, somebody from the outside is coming inward, and that door is revolving us around it. And it's like as one energy moves outward like that, another one's moving in. And everything is in a consistent relationship with everything else. And so because of that, it's natural for us to understand that when we look at planets in our birth chart, there's a natural cycle in terms of awareness, and there's a natural phasal relationship that exists between planets. And when we measure that, what we get is this beautiful harmonic dynamic of where we are in our consciousness and how that has been developed. Okay? And the next thing is how do we actually then establish and what methodology do we use in order to understand these aspects and phases? Well, in evolutionary astrology, you work with the planets, okay? So you've got Mercury, Venus, you've got Mars, you've got Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, okay? And then you have the sun. Now, in this diagram, everything revolves around the sun. So when you measure something in evolutionary astrology terms, there's always a focal point, right? There's a focal point, and there's always a planet that's in relationship to that focal point. And the way that you understand what focal point you have to look at, you understand the relationship that these planets have to the sun. So the sun will always be a focal point, okay? That's so. When you say, for instance, want to understand the phasal relationship between Neptune and Jupiter, well, then it has a little bit of a different cycle, but still the same. When you measure planets in relationship to each other, you're measuring the fastest moving planet in relationship to the slowest moving planet. The fastest moving planet in relationship to the slowest moving planet. So therefore, if I had to say, for instance, ask you, what is the phasal relationship between Jupiter and Neptune? You would go, Jupiter is the fastest moving planet, Neptune's the slowest moving planet, and so therefore, Neptune would be your focus point, because the slowest moving planet is always the focus point. And that's the key that I want you to take away from this conversation. When you measure aspects and phases in your chart, you're measuring two things. One, if you're measuring it against the sun will always be a focus point. So you're always looking for the focus point. And that will always be the sun if you're comparing it against something. Secondly, if you're comparing two planets with each other, you always measure the slowest moving planet as the focus point. So what happens now is you go, okay, I've identified that Neptune is the slowest moving planet. Jupiter's in relationship to it. And so then how do I understand how this works? Very simple. You get a little chart. And this is courtesy of the Evolutionary Astrology glossary, an ebook. And as you can see here on the chart, you've got this whole entire thing. New phase, crescent phase, first quarter phase, gibbous phase, all these phases. And each phase represents an aspect of development. So what you would do is you would take your slowest moving planet and put it at the 0. You would take your fastest moving planet and mathematically calculate the degrees of separation. Okay, so if Neptune's here and Jupiter, say for instance here, you would see that Jupiter is exactly 90 degrees, 90 clicks away from Neptune. And by understanding that phasal relationship, you would go, okay, it's a crisis in action square. And this is what I love about it so much. When we look at squares in astrology, we're like, oh, it's a square. But in EA, there's two types of squares. There's a crisis in action square and a crisis in consciousness square. And they're remarkably different in the sense. Okay, so you can actually try and read your chart. So, oh, I've got Pluto square Mars as an example. The way that Pluto square Mars is going to work in your chart, if it was crisis in consciousness versus crisis in action, are going to be remarkably different. Now, when you have that power within your own awareness to apply that to your chart, you can actually see what you're specifically looking at in terms of your evolutionary development. And it's really, really fascinating. So the next time you begin to understand your chart in terms of aspects and phases, I highly encourage you to learn about aspects and phases, to go and investigate it. And part of my astrology school, I actually teach this when I educate anybody that's wanting to understand evolutionary astrology. So this is something that when you really want to get into astrology, it's something you don't like miss, because it's so empowering. I'll give you a quick example again, just before we jump into this, okay? Let's say, for instance, I have Jupiter and I'm measuring Mars and Jupiter, okay? We know that Jupiter is the slowest moving planet in relationship to Mars. So Jupiter stands there, and we will say that Mars is exactly 300 degrees, okay, away from Jupiter. In other words, Mars has gone all the way around the astrology chart like that because it's moving in that motion, and it gets all the way to that 300 degrees over there. Now, Mars is what is called in a last quarter phase in relationship to Jupiter. So when you look at Mars and Jupiter in the chart and you understand that phasal relationship, you can actually see that the soul's desires in this lifetime, this is the evolutionary astrology, the soul's desires in this lifetime are actually evolving through individuating, in other words, finding and breaking out of the mold of belief systems that they used in the past and allowing us to see perspectives from different unique points of views. That's the way that Mars and Jupiter, in a very plain way, would be operating in somebody's chart. Now, you come into a world that is very like homogenized and very sort of like, this is how truth is and this is what it's got to be. And you put somebody in that's natural tendency is to not follow those rules. Can you begin to see the way that we as human beings are so complex? That's why we have a lot of people in the world saying, well, I'm an atheist, because most of them have got phasal relationships that are breaking down, that are not listening to the general consensus. How much do we accept other people for having their own evolutionary degree? We don't understand it, so therefore we judge it. And this is the type of dynamics that we can get into when we understand more of who we are as a human race to alleviate the chaos that we've got. Food for thought. Hello, my Scorpio friends, and welcome to your sun sign forecast for the month of March 2017. I hope you're well. And of course, as always, I hope you enjoyed the introduction video to this forecast, learning about aspects and phases and how everything is in a phasal relationship with each other. And I actually teach that as part of my astrology schools. So if you are interested in wanting to learn more about astrology in that way, I'm actually starting a class on the 11th of March. So in the description below is an actual link to go and sign up for that. Or otherwise, you can always, write me an email if you've got any questions you want me to ask to respond to, and I'd be happy to do that for you, okay? Alrighty then, Scorpios, and this applies to me as well. We're working with our Pluto transiting the third house of our solar chart. And for us, of course, this is really much about the nature of our communication, the language that we use, the way in which we connect with our immediate environment. And of course, in the past, the way in which we have articulated ourselves, the way that we have explored and allowed our mind to be evolved has been through deep experiences of loss, abandonment, betrayal, and a sense of not really feeling like we can trust in a deep way. And I feel that this is an opportunity in March for us to begin to pioneer a new subconscious way of being that is a lot more supportive, a lot more nurturing, and a lot more protective, I feel, Scorpio. So with Pluto transiting that house, that's of course the big player. But for me, March, it's all about Venus retrograde and the nature of Venus retrograde as well. And there you can see Venus retrograde. And what's really significant about this Venus retrograde is if you look at the dynamics that are taking place, we learned about phasal relationships, and we saw that Mars is in a new phase to Uranus, and we see that Venus is in a balsamic phase to Uranus. Okay, and these dynamics are reflecting to us this completion cycle and this beginning cycle, and that's what I feel this month is really about for us. And it's really supported because if you have a look over here, there's tons of stuff in Pisces as we complete an end, and this is all going to transition into the Aries archetype. So, for a lot of this month, it's really been about following your joy, following your sense of creativity, and being able to find happiness within your life and feel that you're following your special destiny. And when everything moves into the 6th house, you're going to begin to find yourself like really, really stepping up and saying, okay, how do I begin to take this joy and excitement and creativity and mature it? Okay, put it into something that allows me to be seeing it in the outside world. How do I creatively manifest it? So you'll see over here, Mars, it's 27 degrees Aries. It will move into Taurus. There we go, on the 10th of 9th, 10th of March. And I feel this is significant because when Mars moves into Taurus, Taurus reflects to us the constellation, and Jupiter the other, okay? And both of those constellations are actually ruled by Venus. It's our essential needs. That's Taurus. How do we inwardly relate to ourselves? And Libra is how do we relate to other people? And how do other people's needs interrelate with us? So Venus being retrograde this month and Mars moving into Taurus is saying we're pioneering a new evolutionary direction around our inner sense of identity. And the Libra part of it is how we're expanding our truth around the way that we would want to relate to ourselves and other people. And of course, for us, with Jupiter being in our 12th house, there's a lot of completion around a philosophy, a lot of completion around ending, around our perspective, our truth. We're hibernating around our cosmology and our philosophy. So as that's transpiring for us, you'll see that there is a full moon on the 12th of March, and that's happening at 22 degrees Virgo. And the 22 degree Virgo full moon is like when we read a book and we gain a lot of insight from the book, we don't strap the book to our body and then walk around with it as a way of recollecting the insights. And it's the same thing that happened here, right? When we had the solar eclipse in Pisces, the full moon that just recently happened, I think it was the 26th of February, 25th, 26th of February, okay? We got an intense closure around a long evolutionary cycle. And this cycle, this solar eclipse was really bringing into our awareness the insights of that closing chapter, okay? And this full moon that's taking place for us in Virgo is the completion cycle. It's like we're closing the book, we're letting it go, we're putting it down, and we're taking with us the insights. So it's about integration. It's about integrating these insights. And for you, of course, as the full moon is landing in our 11th house, and with the node, the north node there, it's about how do we integrate into the group? How do we integrate into society in a way that allows our dreams to be met? Okay, so it's these insights that we're going to be taking with us, and they're going to be shaping our Venus. The Venus there, can you see it? The Venus retrograde is where we're going to take these insights and readjust our values, readjust our needs, understand what's absolutely essential for us, and we'll move forward in this new direction that we're going to begin to pioneer. And it's really, really magical to actually look at the astrology, because look at this over here, right? The moon conjuncts Jupiter at the same time that Mercury enters Aries. So we've got insights, and then as the full moon begins to complete itself and it moves into Libra and it conjuncts Jupiter, Mercury in Aries says, right, let's begin pioneering these new things. And Jupiter is a really big thing, because it's like, what is the philosophy? What is the truth? What is the perspective? Where are you growing in your life? And that is it's in Libra. So it's like, how are your social experiences happening? How is your ability to relate to other people changing for yourself? What type of perspective do you choose to use in relating to others and yourself? And I know from my own personal work that it's changing on an intense level. So this is a new direction that's pioneering for us, and those insights are now going to become more available, obviously, after this full moon that takes place for us. Now, on the 20th of this month, okay, the sun enters Aries. And again, we begin to then take these insights that we've had, and we begin to then have the sun now say to us, okay, now I've got the energy. Now we're going to really pay attention to this new direction. So action is now going to be the way in which we behave from the 20th onwards. So as the moon conjunct Saturn, there, can you see in Sagittarius, right? Those insights that were happening from the full moon and its connection with Jupiter, and now its connection with Saturn, those experiences are going to be fully aware and awake within our conscious as the sun enters Aries, and we begin to then explore that. Okay, so what does it mean to put one foot in front of the other and see what happens when I'm acting in these new instinctual ways? And that's this process. Look how everything shifted out of Pisces now and into the 6th house. So expect a very busy month for you, Scorpios. And then if we have a look on the 22nd, this is a day where we kind of just chill out for a bit, okay? The 22nd, we've got Pluto conjunct the moon, and Pluto conjunct the moon, squaring Jupiter, squaring Uranus, etc. This is where we're going to finally let go of all the things that are not necessary for us anymore, okay? This is where we're going to let go of the emotional attachments to the old. That's the final goodbye, guys. Thanks very much for having us. We had a fantastic dinner, and now it's time for us to go, kind of thing. And that's a big deal. So the 22nd is when the energetic shock will come through and allow us to finally separate from the old. And that's it. From then onwards out, guys, it's on a surfboard, riding the highest wave, just cruising along, really beginning to discover this new sense of direction. And on the 25th, look at this over here. Venus and the sun have switched places. Look at that. They switch places, and the moon connects with the south node, and that's when the actual experience and the energy of washing away and the new direction will be fully present with us. So whatever happens at the end of this month, know that this is the new direction that the evolutionary intention of Scorpio is playing out for us in a big way. Okay, let's see what else is going to manifest for us. One last thing, Jupiter square Pluto. This is not as much of a significant event though, but it still has a very impactful experience for us, of course, because Jupiter being 19 degrees and Pluto being 19 degrees, that is a direct square, and it is also what is called a last quarter square. And this last quarter square means individuation. It means breaking down and individuating yourself. So this is all about individuality. This is all about pioneering a new individuality, pardon me. And you can see everything started in Pisces and now ends up in Aries. Okay. All right, guys. Well, I hope that this gives you some direction for this month. And of course, if you are wanting to learn astrology still, I've got my classes starting on the 11th of March. Okay. Other than that, have a fantastic month. Take care. Bye-bye.